Okay, so if you're the owner of a cat that gets nervous, anxious, or maybe even a bit aggressive during grooming, then this is a safety briefing you absolutely cannot afford to miss. We are about to break down a really urgent warning coming straight from professional groomers about the hidden, and I mean hidden, dangers of stress and what you need to know to keep your cat safe. Let's just dive right in.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll talk about the tough choice every owner of an anxious cat faces. Then, we'll get into the very real medical dangers of extreme stress. After that, we'll get super practical with a 6-point checklist you can use for your own cat. We'll also cover what your responsibilities are, what the groomer can and can't do, and finally, we'll answer the big question: when is it just not worth the risk?
All right, first up, the central problem here. A lot of us choose non-anesthetic grooming because, we're worried about the risks of putting our cat under. And that makes sense. But what groomers really need you to understand is that neither choice is 100% risk-free. And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one hand, with anesthetic grooming, the big risk is a bad reaction to the medication. The cat's unconscious. But on the other hand, with non-anesthetic grooming, your cat is wide awake and totally aware of everything that's happening. And in that case, the risk isn't from a drug, it's from the cat's own body getting so overwhelmed by stress that it triggers a health crisis.
So let's zoom in on that non-anesthetic grooming for a minute. It is so easy to just write off a cat's behavior as them just being scared or stressed out. But we're not just talking about feelings here. We are talking about a potential medical emergency that is literally triggered by that fear.
So, this is the key. We have to redefine what we mean by extreme stress. This is not just your cat being scared. It's a physiological state. It's when the body is so completely overwhelmed that its vital systems can actually start to fail. Think of it like a system-wide shutdown, a total overload.
And the stakes, they are incredibly, incredibly high. This kind of stress response, all on its own, can trigger things like cardiovascular events, a full-blown heart attack, seizures, serious dehydration, and in the absolute worst-case scenario, even sudden death. It's so important to get this. These aren't injuries from the grooming tools. These are internal crises caused entirely by the cat's own stress.
Okay, that's the really scary stuff. So the big question is, how do you know if your cat is in that danger zone? Well, this next section is your tool. It's a concrete, diagnostic checklist that every single cat owner should be familiar with before they even think about making a grooming appointment.
So this is the question you need to ask yourself, right? How can you, as the owner who knows your cat best, tell if they cross that line from just being a little anxious into this really high-risk category? Well, the answer is in looking for a few very specific behaviors.
Let's walk through this list together. Number 1, is your cat already lashing out from inside the carrier? Number 2, do they bite or attack when the groomer tries to get them out? 3, does a simple nail trim become a full-on wrestling match where all 4 paws have to be held down? 4, does the groomer have to keep all 4 of those paws restrained for the entire groom? Number 5, constant panic, and I mean non-stop, hissing, struggling, screaming, with 0 moments of calm. And finally, number 6, do they fight so hard that even the bath and the blow dry requires full restraint? Be really honest with yourself as you think about your cat.
Okay, did you go through the list? Now, there's a magic number here that professionals say is the critical line in the sand, and that number is 3.
And here's the bottom line, straight from the groomers. If your cat shows 3 or more of those 6 signs, you have to start thinking of that grooming appointment as a high-risk medical procedure. It's not just a haircut anymore. It's a situation that demands serious caution from absolutely everyone involved. Okay, so what if your cat does fall into that high-risk category? Well, your responsibility doesn't just end when you drop them off at the door. In fact, it actually gets bigger. So let's talk about what you need to do to help lower that risk. First off, do everything you can to make the trip less stressful. Cover the carrier so they're not overwhelmed by everything flashing by. Keep a close eye on your cat on the way there. And listen, this last one, it's not a suggestion. It is non-negotiable. You absolutely must stay at the salon for the entire appointment. If an emergency happens, you have to be right there ready to act. And here's another huge step you can take. Talk to your vet. Ask them about pre-visit anti-anxiety medication. A safe, low-side-effect medication prescribed by a professional could be a game changer and a much safer option than putting your cat's body through that kind of stress storm.
All right, this next part can be a little tough to hear, but it is so important. We need to get crystal clear on where the groomer's responsibility begins and where it ends. Understanding this boundary is key.
So here's what it boils down to. A professional groomer's job is to use their expertise to groom your cat without causing any external injury. No nicks from the clippers, no harm from the way they're being handled. That is their fundamental promise to you.
And this quote from a professional really says it all. We can groom an aggressive cat without injury. We cannot be responsible for problems caused by the cat's own stress. You see, they can control their tools, they can control their hands, but what they can't control is that internal physiological firestorm happening inside your cat's body. And that brings us to our last and probably most serious point. For some cats, the risk is just too high. So let's talk about the safest choice for the animals that are under the most severe stress.
And here it is, the final recommendation. If your cat shows all 6 of those warning signs we talked about, the safest, most responsible advice from groomers is to avoid professional grooming altogether, period. The risk of a fatal stress event is simply not a risk worth taking.
So what's the alternative? Well, the focus completely shifts to prevention and maintenance you can do at home. That means daily brushing to stop mats before they even start. Maybe learning how to do little partial shaves on problem spots yourself. And ultimately, it means making a choice to prioritize your cat's well-being and safety over the idea of a perfect coat.
And that leaves us with this one last, powerful question that every owner of a high-stress cat really needs to sit with and ask themselves. Is this grooming appointment genuinely for my cat's comfort? Or is it really for my own convenience? The answer to that question could truly be the difference between life and death.